We're under the 5-minute rule. Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and welcome, Chairman Bernanke. It seems to me too often that we run into our financial problems and then there's the wringing of the hands, and yet many have predicted that we're going to get into these problems. For instance, in the 90s, it wasn't a total surprise to a lot of people that things were out of whack when it came to the NASDAQ. And yet the NASDAQ bubble collapses and people panic and people get hurt, and then there's an outcry. Well, what we have to do is we need more regulations again, and there's been fraud. Of course, all the penalties necessary to take care of Enron were taken care of without new regulations, and the market sort of handled the distortions that were there, but nobody asked the questions, why was there such distortion? Same way in the housing bubble, same predictions have been going on for years and years, and yet everybody gets reassured and everybody knows that we have to spread home ownership to those who don't really qualify, and yet the same bubble is being built and nobody said, well, where does all this credit come from? And I think we fail to ask the question what the cause is, and then when the problem hits, then we treat the symptoms and we say, well, what we need are more regulations. If we would only regulate the lenders, we could have prevented these problems from occurring. And I don't buy into that. I don't think it's that simple. And I think we fail too often to even look to the fundamental monetary policy, because easy credit does allow people to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. When you have interest rates down to 1%, and then you subsidize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac with a line of credit, and then you encourage these loans, I don't see why anybody should be surprised this should happen. But my concern is that we don't look to the cause, which is easy credit. I mean, we have no savings rates, so this credit has to come somewhere. It usually comes out of thin air, and we end up with these problems. But one measurement that we used to have to sort of indicate what's going on monetarily was, the M3 numbers, which I think is an important number. And there is a private source now that reports M3 numbers. And I think most likely they're pretty accurate compared to the old M3. And they report that M3 is growing at an over 11% rate, which I would think would get people's attention if it was an official report from the Federal Reserve. So it seems like there's almost a distraction from the real cause. Then again, we look at our CPI and we say, oh, the CPI is not going up so badly. We have no inflation. And yet you look at the cost of housing. Prices of houses were soaring, but they're excluded from the CPI. And it just seems like we don't have everything on the table, and that we should be more concerned about, monetary policy per se, rather than saying, well, we have problems, all we need to do is here in Congress, if we just wrote more regulations, we're going to solve all our problems. But I have one specific question dealing with the recent crisis coming up and the recent changes in the stock market, and that was on February 27th was a sudden change in the market, and ours went down over 400 points. On days like that, does the Presidential Working Group on Financial Markets, do you have meetings to talk about sudden changes in the marketplace like that?
We did not have a meeting on February 27th. It's a usual practice whenever there is some stress in financial markets for the staff, the senior staff or deputies to be in touch with each other just to see what are you seeing, what are you seeing, just trying to gather information to see if anything is going on. In this particular case, there was no indication other than the computer problem at the New York Stock Exchange. There was no indication of any kind of breakdown of markets or anything like that, and so no further action was taken and no meeting of the principals occurred.
So the working group has not taken any precise action in the last several months, would you say? Or have you taken some action of some sort? And why is that information not readily available to us and to the markets? Because it would have profound significance if we knew that group was interfering in the marketplace.
We took no action with respect to the stock market. We released, as you know, a set of principles describing how we believe that oversight of hedge funds and private pools of capital ought to be conducted principally through a market discipline approach, as we discussed in that document.
Is there any chance that we would ever get minutes of meetings for the working group, that the Congress would know more about how the working group operates and how often? I understand it's more active and you meet more often than you used to.
I don't know. I don't know what the information gathering is. We meet, we discuss broad issues of general importance in the financial area in terms of financial regulation, financial markets. And then if we have findings, we present them to the public in the form of the principles, for example.
My time is expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.